There are three taxes an organization pays when somebody makes the cheap choice. In other words, cheap can get very expensive very quickly. So those three taxes are taxes that come as a consequence of making the cheap choice. As a speaker, I get asked all the time, how do you come up with your rates? How do you come up with your fees? I'm paying all that money for an hour for you to talk. And when somebody says that, what I know at that point is they don't understand value. In other words, there is a difference between cost and value. And that value is your expertise at helping them not make mistakes that being cheap causes. Now, think about that statement. Now, I've said a couple of times there are three taxes that organizations and people pay as a consequence of saying, listen, I'm just going to be cheap about this. I mean, they may not say, I'm going to be cheap, and you know they're being cheap, right? In other words, they're looking at it as the hour or the procedure or the keynote or it's a day of your time. It's not what value is. There is a difference between value and cost. So let me get to those three taxes. Number one is what I call the correction task. And this is the cost of hiring a second person to come in and fix the mistakes that the first person made because of a cheap decision. The second tax is called the opportunity tax. This is the cost of what has been lost in sales, in revenue, in getting what you want, need, and deserve, because somebody made the cheaper choice, which proved to be the wrong choice because you should have hired the person, the expert who already knows what you thought the person who was the cheapest person to have. In other words, you thought they had expertise and they don't, and now you've lost revenue, you've lost opportunity. The third tax is what's called the velocity tax. And this is the drag on the organization that is caused by the poor choice, the cheap choice, the person who doesn't bring the expertise that you thought you were buying by getting the cheapest deal, the cheapest choice. Now, these three taxes can be individual or they can all be present based on the decisions that are made in the organization. Cheap is expensive.